Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlin.
And I'm Ben Lander.
And we're going to sit still. Are you John adjusting the camera? Are we good? Did you get my good side? No. Okay. She did not. No. Hey, welcome very much. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you're the first time joining us, welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about what the show is all about. This show is exactly what the byline says. It's water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. What we try to do here is we talk about the same types of things that people out there in the world are talking about. But what makes the show unique is that we try to do it from a uniquely Christian perspective. So as we're talking about these issues, what we try to do is always put Christ first. And so agree with us, disagree with us. Hopefully at least you'll walk out of this seeing how Christians can talk about these issues and should be talking about these issues. That's the goal. Speaking of whether you agree with us or disagree with us, you are free to do so, and you can join in the conversation. The way you do that is by commenting in the live chat if you're watching us on the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel, or in the comment section if you're watching us on Facebook, on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. We are live streaming right now to both. If you do that, then I will hopefully see it right here on my trusty computer in front of me where I have both of those tabs open. If I don't happen to notice it because I get wrapped up in his stimulating commentary, then our producer, my lovely wife Mary Kay, has little signs that she will hold up to tell me, hey Ken, look at Facebook or look at YouTube. So I will know to look at the comment. We'll read your comment live here on the air. It'll appear in that little box over there to Ben's left. And we will talk about it, and we can converse back and forth. So share your thoughts, opinions, agree, disagree. We've had people sometimes comment and just, ask a completely different question. That's always fun when people do that. Nothing to do with any of the topics that we're talking about, and we kind of have to. And when that happens, I'm glad that I'm the one that has the computer in front of me and read, because that means he has to answer the question first. See how that works? So anyway, that's what the show's about. I'm kind of rushing through things tonight to get right into it because we got 5 topics to talk about. So, I'm supposed to introduce the first one too. I was about to feel it's you, but I can't do that.
We can switch.
No, it's all right. We got this. So let's jump into our first topic of the day, shall we?
Sure.
The first topic is from a speech that President Biden recently gave this week. I think it was in the Oval Office, as I recall, when he gave it, where he was responding to criticism. A jobs report came out recently that said that in April, the United States economy added just 266,000 jobs, whereas prior to the report coming out, economists had estimated that we were going to add about 1 million jobs. And this was the biggest discrepancy or falling short that we've seen between estimate and reality since this article says since 1998. So it was a huge gap between what economists thought was going to happen and what was going to happen. Many economists have turned around and blamed, quote unquote, the unemployment, the current unemployment package that's being offered by the federal government. What happens is the federal government provides the funds to the states, and then the states actually kind of distribute it. But essentially what it works out to is there are people right now on unemployment who can receive up to like $300 per week on unemployment. And so the argument goes, people are being essentially paid to not go back to work. And so as long as you have this level of generosity in the unemployment benefit, that it incentivizes people not to return to work. And so according to these economists, that's what's happening. Now, President Biden responded to that recently, and he said, first of all, that his expectation, he says, first of all, look, we're going to reaffirm that if you're a worker and you are offered what's called comparable employment, that's a legal term, but if you're offered comparable employment and you don't accept it, then you're going to be cut off from unemployment. And he says, we're going to make sure people understand that. We're also going to make sure people understand that they need to be looking for work in order to maintain eligibility for unemployment. But then he kind of said, but I don't really think this is a problem anyways. But he said, we're going to make sure people know this, but I don't think that the current unemployment package that's being offered has anything to do with this falling short. And in his quote, we're not seeing evidence of that, is what he said, something along those lines. What did you think when you heard these comments?
I like the way that this one's from Yahoo News, but the headline kind of sums it up. It says, Biden denies workers are turning down jobs to collect unemployment, then announces push to make them stop. So it's heavy laden with irony there. Yeah, from a Christian perspective. Sorry, my phone's going off here.
Answer it. You just hold up the mic. You can hear who it is. Who is it?
That's Rob. Hey, Rob, if you're listening to this, we're on air.
Okay, wait, hold on. If he's listening to this, wouldn't he know we're on air?
Yeah, if you hear this later, you will call him.
You should probably explain and then text him.
You can take a break. You can text him right now and tell him to tune in and watch the show. Then if he wants to talk to you, he can comment in the live chat.
The only reason I'm saying he should take it, quote unquote, take it, is because he's trying to make a donation to the food closet.
He's got a donation for the food closet.
And we were trying to arrange like a frozen donation, and we were trying to arrange meeting up with them so we could get it into the building.
That's okay. He can comment in the live chat. I'll tell you what, you answer that, and I'll talk about that. That's okay. I'll keep the show going. Look, from a Christian perspective, we have two, well, I don't know whether we necessarily say they're competing interests here. Number one is, give to everyone who asks of you. We're supposed to try to help people, and speaking of the food closet, we certainly should be helping people in need. The coronavirus has hit a lot of people hard. I personally know people who lost their jobs as a result of it, and so, yes, we should be helping people in these situations. But there's a balancing act there, because long term, it's not good for anybody for able-bodied people not to be working. Our economy will collapse if that happens. And so we need, at the same time, to balance that generosity to help people who are in genuine need, while also incentivizing getting them back to work. And now we may disagree about where that line is drawn. I do believe, contrary to the president's statements here, that there is some evidence. Whether you think it carries the day is a different matter, but I think there's some pretty strong evidence that is what we're seeing going on here.
Well, if nothing else, I think we've seen anecdotal evidence here at Trinity, even with, we'll just say, some people who either come asking for help and just firsthand have told us how much they're getting in unemployment, and that, without saying it, have said they're not really incentivized to go back to work. Yeah. So we have seen that anecdotal evidence, and I think you're right. It's, on one hand, we're supposed to help those in need, but also it's the whole give a man a fish, teach a man to fish kind of analogy. Or, take 1 Timothy 5:18, for a worker is worth his wages, right? So there is this aspect of work that is a part of God's plan for humanity. Work was in the garden, that was part of God's plan for paradise, was that we would have meaningful work. Now, part of the fall is that work became much harder, and that, the ground, through toil and hard work, hard labor, the ground will produce for you, was one of the curses of the fall. But regardless, I think work is necessary for people to really feel valued, and so there is this kind of exchange of, a worker has to be worth their wages, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so I think, there needs to be a good balance.
And there needs to be the right attitude. I mean, too often when you get these political debates, it's always like we feel like we have to be completely on this side or completely on the other side. And lots of times it gets very vitriolic between the two sides. And this is one of those examples where I think that, we can, as Christians should, I don't know if the middle ground is the right word for it. It's more what I was talking about. Understand that there are legitimate concerns that need to be addressed. If you think that the unemployment benefits being given out right now are causing this problem, which I kind of do, okay, you can't be advocating for that in such a way that you sound like, or you are completely ignoring the fact that there's still a legitimate need to also help people.
Right.
And so you need to be sensitive to both sides of the issue. I would say to both sides of the political aisle. Need to be sensitive to both concerns, but all too often we just want to ignore the other side's concerns. That's the way politics works, and just act like they're just being stupid. And you'll hear rhetoric when someone objects to this, it's like, well, you don't care about unemployed people, you don't want to help them at all. oh, and it goes both ways, obviously. But I think it's even more than anecdotal. Some of the statistics that were said in this article, for example, the National Federation of Independent Businesses has reported that business owners have struggled to hire help, with more than 4 in 10 business owners saying they have open positions that have not been filled. That's critical. Now, there was another thing here. This is a statement from Senator Ben Sasse.
Just out of curiosity, does it say anything in there about whether or not they can't fill these positions because there's a lack of applications or a lack of applications of qualified people?
That particular one doesn't say. I've read the entire quote. Okay. Now, Senator Ben Sasse, again, I take this with a grain of salt, like I do anything any politician says. But he does say there are 7,400,000 jobs open in the U.S., but fewer than 300,000 found work last month. Why? He's asking the question, why do you think that is? Now, again, that may be true, and if that is true, then that would also provide evidence that I think that the unemployment benefits have a role to play. And I don't think any one of these things would carry the day, but they pile upon each other. And another one says a study published earlier this year found that for every 10% increase in unemployment benefits, job applications declined by nearly 4%. And so, to some extent, you think it would be common sense. Right. But again, you need to strike a balance. I do find it interesting that last one says for every 10% increase in unemployment, job applications decline not by 10%, but by 4%. Which I think supports the notion that there is a legitimate need there, because it's not a one-to-one relationship. And there are people that genuinely want to go back to work. That is certainly true. And again, that's another thing I think politicians do. We paint things with too broad a brush. Everybody's lazy. Nobody wants to go back to work. No. There are people that, even if they're on unemployment, don't like being on unemployment and want to go back to work, and probably, frankly, would go back to work even if they were making a little less money. Sure. But there are, at the same time, I think there are also undoubtedly people who are not going back to work because of the money they're making.
Right. On the flip side of that coin, to answer your question, I think that kind of points to the answer to Mary Kay's question of, is it because they're not suitable applicants, or there are no applicants at all? Well, at least 4% of them, for every 10% of benefits, are not applying at all.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that some people need to remember, regarding federal programs, is that in many regards, if you qualify for one federal program, then you also qualify for a lot of the other programs.
Sorry, Katie says the sound is echoing.
The sound is echoing? Talk for me.
Echo.
Sorry.
It may just be your mic was up.
Well, my mic is on right now, so there's a good chance that my mic is picking up while my mic is on, that I'm picking up.
If we talk when her mic is on, you're gonna hear an echo.
Yeah.
So we need to shut.
Or you need to let me finish talking, and then I'll mute my mic. So my point is that a lot of these other federal programs, like TFAP, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, the Energy Assistance, some of these programs, and if you qualify for unemployment, that qualifies you for a lot of those other programs. So you have these people who are getting unemployment, and now they're allowed to get all this other stuff as well. So yeah, I can see where if you were in that situation just because of COVID, why you might say, hey.
Well, there's another.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Exactly. Another.
I think I was about ready to do. I'm like, literally, he's saying this while my finger is on the mute button. I'm about ready to hit it.
To that point, there's another anecdotal piece that I was just talking to somebody else the other day.
Mike is not muted. Somebody tell us if he's still echoing. Sorry.
Who, if someone was saying that they knew of somebody who was placed out of a job due to COVID, were receiving government benefits, but, however, were also found side work on the side of the side contract that was under the table, So that's kind of double dipping, and it's
Not kind of, that is
double dipping.
That is against the law.
Yeah, exactly. Dishonest. But how many? And it's hard to track how many people are out there doing that. You'd like to believe that it's the minority, and it probably is the minority, but it still could be an issue.
Well, and I come at this from the perspective of having a background where I spent 2 decades. I'm still a practicing attorney, but only representing the church and school here now. But 2 decades in civil litigation, where I did an awful lot of workers' comp, and I will tell you that in the workers' compensation community, it's funny because the lawyers who represent claimants tend to almost think that everybody's legit and legitimately hurt and needs to work. And of course, the lawyer, and yes, I understand, I'm generalizing here, okay? And the lawyers who represent employers tend to think everybody's a faker that should be going back to work a lot sooner than they really are. And of course, the reality is, if you really get the trenches and you have an open mind about it, the reality is somewhere in the middle. Like there absolutely are. I mean, I'm not going to obviously one of my worst stories. I had a client. I understand in order to get workers' comp, to continue getting it lots of times, you need to provide doctor's notes that are taking you out of work. You can't just say, I'm hurt. The doctor has to say you're not capable of working. Had a client who was trying to 40 doctor's notes. I think it was one of these things where you looked at the handwriting on it, and it's like, the handwriting on the top half of this note looks awfully similar to this, like identical to this note from 2 months ago, just only the dates are different. And then, sure enough, you pull stuff and you realize that, they changed the dates on the note. So that absolutely does happen. But at the same time, I've had a number of clients who had to fight tooth and nail for benefits when they were obviously legitimately hurt. Yeah. So look at it both ways. Are there people who will try to game the system and stay out of work as long as possible? Absolutely. And if you don't think that happens, you're just naive. I'm sorry. It does happen. I've seen it firsthand. And so it does not surprise me in the least that the higher the unemployment benefits go. Now, the flip side is the lower the benefits go, then the more risk you have of not really giving people the help they need.
And making it harder for them to get the help.
There's a minimum level you need to be able to achieve in order to get to work. I mean, I've had clients that might put gas in the car, for example, and they couldn't get out to the job interviews. And so that's the thing. You need to find that sweet spot. And I don't think we shouldn't just be, and I don't know, the president's comments to me right now come across as kind of just unduly defensive. It's like and that's politics. I'm not necessarily blaming individually President Biden, because that's the way politicians work nowadays. It's almost like you can't even say that you might, you know what, this might not have been a great idea. Maybe we should pull that back, because your political opponents are just going to pounce on it, and then your career is over. And so you've got to act like you've never done anything wrong, or even made a minor miscalculation. Everything you've done is completely perfect. Unless it's something you said 30 years ago, and then you're running for office. Never mind.
Well, I think that's a byproduct of identity politics. When politicians are so entrenched in their party that to even concede one point that the other side is making is tantamount to saying, to exactly ending your whole career, basically.
And we need to get past that, because we're talking about unity and division. We're never going to get past the division unless we can get past that. I mean, this is the type of, to me, this is the type of issue that both sides should be able to come together on and say, the evidence does seem to indicate that maybe we bumped this up a little bit too high, because it's having this adverse effect. So let's still make sure we're helping these folks, but try to bring it down a little bit so we can, or there was Montana. I thought I think it was Montana. I'm looking at this article.
Yeah, there's actually Montana.
Yeah, Montana's actually doing something to incentivize going back to work. So rather than just, increasing the unemployment benefits, they're keeping their unemployment benefits where they are, but using this money to say, but if you go back to work, hey, we're going to give you this bonus for going back to work. So something like that to incentivize people to get back into the workforce.
Also, Arkansas and South Carolina also pulled out of the federal program,
right,
and are incentivizing through their own.
So we can be creative about it, but let's first acknowledge that where the evidence seems to be pointing and go from there. So,
but that would be too reasonable.
Well, we are throwing, as a country, we are throwing a lot of money at people. What is it? We never did figure out what it's called. Like the last check was a stimulus check.
Oh, now it's a IRS direct deposit. I forget the name of the program of this one.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean this one they're going to charge us income tax on?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Didn't say anything.
I don't know which ones of these checks that have been coming out that they're charging us income tax, going to charge us income tax on. But yeah, I mean, you've got that money. A lot of the benefits for just a lot of things like have been extended because of what was the name of the plan that Biden they put through his plan for
COVID relief?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember what it was called.
Basically.
Yeah. So a lot of benefits have been extended because of that. There isn't, I mean, there are a lot of, I know people are having a rough time, but the government has, over the course, even when Trump was still in office, has done a lot of things, whether it's the federal government or here, at least in Maryland, if the state government has had a hand in it, I'm not completely sure, but I know that a lot of these benefits have been extended, and there's going to be a point at which we're going to say enough people have been vaccinated, or we're going to say that COVID is not as big of an issue anymore, and these things are going to drop out. I mean, they're not going to be available anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you can go out and vacation now and go to Disney World and the
Go back
beach
to work.
and everything, yeah, I mean,
I know there's been some hotels, like a lot of hotels, beaches and everything like that have been saying, look, we're not going to be able to provide all services we provided in the past because we can't hire. There was a news piece I was watching the other day about us. We haven't been able to hire any employees to fill those spots. So yeah, we do need to just have a reasonable conversation, get past the political divides, and figure out how we can incentivize people who are able to get back to work, and those who can't, give them the help that they need.
yeah.
So, all right. Shall we introduce story number 2, sir?
Sure thing. This is sort of a developing story. I'm sure you may have heard of.
Yeah, there's some new developments today. I don't know if you saw the latest.
No, I guess maybe you'll have something to add then to the end of this. There you go. So I'll do part 1 of this, and Ken will add the new development that just came out today. But as of yesterday morning, Palestinian militants had launched dozens of rockets from Gaza into Israel, into Jerusalem, toward the Al-Aqsa. Well, it was into Jerusalem. This came on the back end of weeks of unrest, rising tension in Jerusalem, specifically between Israel and Palestine, between Israelis and Palestinians over the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and specifically the issue at hand was the access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel had placed up fences because of the increased tension and things, and also one of the other disputes is some evictions of Palestinian tenants in eastern Jerusalem, I believe, over disputed territory, disputed housing that they were residing in, that they were going to be evicted soon. And so this, of course, the month of Ramadan, this month is the month of Ramadan, and so religious sensibilities are heightened anyway. This is typically the time of year when clashes are expected to happen. But this one kind of, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, the Palestinians crossed a, quote, red line by launching these rockets into Israel, and so Israel retaliated with airstrikes, and says that more than 700 Palestinians were hurt in clashes with Israeli security forces in Jerusalem, across the West Bank, in the past 24 hours, including nearly 500 who were treated at hospitals. Now, there were, I believe, as far as what this article says, I think 8 Palestinians had lost their lives, including 3 children, in these airstrikes. I don't know if that number has changed yet, but they are certainly ramping up for increased conflict because despite other nations getting involved and calling for de-escalation, the U.S. being one of them, it seems like both sides are gearing up again for more conflict.
Yeah, it's been ongoing. The latest that I just saw an article today, 4:12 p.m. this afternoon, actually, indicates that there was an air attack from Israel into Gaza where they took out a high-rise building where a lot of Hamas leadership was running out of headquarters. and they're saying that Bassem Issa, who was the Hamas's highest-ranking military official in Gaza, has been killed, and several other their head of the cyber command, head of the research, head of the chief engineer. So there were a lot of Hamas leaders that were in this building that was bombed, or I don't know if it was bombed or missile or how it was attacked, but Prime Minister Netanyahu did acknowledge on media that this happened. They did kill the various different commanders. Now, and then on top of that, Israeli commanders have said that 3 infantry brigades are preparing for a worst-case scenario in the conflict. And so there is some suggestion that Israel may be preparing for, what's military tactic 101? You start with the airstrikes, and then you move the ground forces in. As a matter of fact, I think on even some of the outskirts there of Gaza, they've already seen some Israeli forces on the ground. And so you're right, it certainly does seem to be escalating, and obviously, this is a tough. I should have had me introduce the story. You talk first on it.
We kind of both introduced this one because it was part.
Oh, good. You can talk first. Go for
it. On one hand,
we have another comment about the sound.
Oh, it's still in it.
Maybe it's my phone I'm listening to, but it sounds like you were speaking from a tunnel. It's an echo sound. Anyone else hear this? Jeanette Harrington on Facebook is saying that. Mary Kay, how are you sounding on your end there? Normal? All right, then it sounds like it should be okay on our end. And we don't have any other inputs here except for these 2 mics right in front of us. So, no, I don't. My wife's asking me about a set of your headphones or anything here. That's the only set I got in here. So I apologize. Don't worry about it right now. Just keep on going. So you could unplug the headphones from the computer and plug them into your. Yeah, probably is. So don't do that. So don't worry about it. Let's just keep plugging away. So anyway, you're saying, man?
Yeah, I hate to say this, but anytime a headline comes across about unrest in the Middle East, it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of the same story playing out. You expect it to be the same story played out again and again and again. So there's a little bit of weariness in this whole conflict, and we wonder if there's ever truly going to be an end to it. We do as Christians, taking the Christian perspective, we see that the Lord will come back, and so there will ultimately be an end to all conflict. However, in the Middle East, it's a particular hotspot.
Mary, just mute that one. Sorry, you might have an answer to the issue here. Close that. Click that. Check 1, 2. Everybody still hears us. All right. Let us know if that eliminated the echo problem. There might have been the mic on the laptop itself might have actually been turned on for some reason as well. It shouldn't have been that way, but it looks like that might have been the issue. So if the echo is gone, let us know in the comments, please. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Hopefully. So I was just saying that, we as Christians, the Christian perspective is that ultimately there will be an end to all conflict when the Lord returns. Until then, we are called, as Scripture calls us to, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, to live at peace with everyone. Now, I know it's a lot more gray area involved in terms of the Middle East conflict, and there's no easy solution, humanly speaking, as far as we can tell. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue since, the past, for decades, since Israel was really reinstated as a nation, and even before that. So
Jeanette Harrington says the echo is gone. Thank you,
Oh,
Jeanette.
good.
That was
Thank
the problem.
you.
Glad we were able to figure that out.
Great. Thanks, Jeanette. So first and foremost, I would say, certainly we pray for the victims, especially the innocent bystanders. Seems like at least an entire family had lost 7 people,
Yeah.
I think. So it was more than 8, I think, that had lost lives, but especially the ones with children. That's devastating. And any time that conflicts escalate like this, you have the potential for loss of life, and that's certainly not something that we wish to see. I don't think that's anything necessarily that Israel or Palestine wants to see. However, one side, I don't think it's something either side wants to see. However, the militants on Hamas's side seem to be at least from what I've been able to tell, more the agitators.
Well, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. Hamas exists in large part with the goal of eliminating Israel and wiping them off the map. I mean, that's part of, I don't know if it's called their charter or whatever. I mean, that's part of the organization's founding principles. So, I mean, there is that. And too often I think people sugarcoat that and don't want to acknowledge it, but that's true.
There was a video that was circulating, I guess it was on Facebook. Apparently, at least Hamas has a group on Facebook, but there's a video circulating social media of these protesters in the Al-Aqsa Mosque from Hamas, and they were chanting, a bunch of people chanting, and originally it was posted up as, saying, hey, look at all these people in solidarity protesting, but when you translate it, they were really saying was bomb Tel Aviv. So yeah, it's definitely.
Now, that being said, I'm curious because I don't know. I mean, the article talked about how there's all these protests and this unrest was kind of rising in Jerusalem during Ramadan, during Jerusalem Day was the celebration that was supposed to be coming up. It sounds like the festivities for that have been postponed in light of everything. But it sounds like a lot of the protests were right there around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Mm-hmm. And there was some unrest this past Monday, and I guess in an attempt to quell whatever was going on, it's a little vague on details of what was going on, the Israeli police fired tear gas, stun grenades, rubber bullets, things like that. And then Palestinians there were throwing rocks and things at them. And apparently, more than a dozen tear gas canisters and stun grenades landed inside the mosque. Mm. I mean, I could have told you if that happened, it wasn't going to end well.
There's a picture of a broken window.
Is there? Yeah. I mean, and so again, I'm not. Please don't take me the wrong way. I'm not like jumping to blame the Israeli police because I don't know exactly what was going on. All I'll say is, no matter what's going on, if that is at all avoidable, you need to avoid that because there's no way you can't expect. They consider this to be the third holiest site, and I again acknowledging, believe me, I think it's the Temple Mount. That's what I call, that's but looking at it from their perspective, they think it's third holiest site in their religion. How do you think they're going to react when tear gas canisters and stun grenades end up going into the mosque?
Yeah,
I mean, and so that's just if your goal is to minimize the tensions, then you gotta try to make sure that doesn't happen.
Now Israel has apparently, at least the Israel Supreme Court has postponed the hearing, I think, for those tenants that were going to be evicted,
right,
in an effort because they were citing circumstances,
everything that's going on right now,
because of everything that's going on. So that's, I guess, an effort you could point to de-escalate. However, the military advance
is not de-escalating. And maybe you just say, well, decision's just going to... And the problem with, I guess, and I understand there's just no good solution. Yeah. I mean, I get why they're saying we don't want to make that decision right now or release that decision right now because it's just going to add to everything that's going on. The flip side of the coin is, fine, okay, so what are you going to do? Everything's going to calm down at some point, and then you're going to release it, and now that's going to be the incentive to start it all up again?
Exactly.
I mean, we've got to... We've got to find a deeper solution here. Sad stuff. So
and that's one of those things that, like I said, humanly speaking, I don't know that there necessarily is a mutually agreeable deeper solution.
No, and obviously I understand. I can understand some of the perspective of both sides. Some of what Hamas teaches and preaches, I'm never going to understand. I'm never going to advocate for, obviously. Just putting myself in the shoes of the civilians living in that area. Yeah, they don't live under good circumstances. They want to have their own state. I can get that. Israel, there's always been a fight over borders and what properly belongs to them and what doesn't belong to them. And I also agree that, look, people have the right to defend themselves.
Sure.
And, if Hamas is firing rockets into Israel, then Israel cannot be expected just to sit back and do nothing. But as is quite often the situation, the truth in lots of these situations, it's like, it rarely are circumstances as simple as one side or the other tries to make them appear.
Right.
If that's the way of looking at it. So anyway, all right. let's move on to something even less controversial, shall we? Yeah. He says with tongue in cheek. Make sure I got the right story here. What is this? Okay, do I have these out of order? I think I have them.
Study.
Yeah, hold on. I got mine out of order here. That's the byline. Oh, good. That one is a little bit less controversial. Than we'll get into controversy with the next story again. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about here is there was a peer-reviewed study that came out in the journal Sociology of Religion that, if I were to tell you the general conclusion of the study, a lot of people would say, well, that's not surprising at all. And what it found is it took a statistical analysis of 166 countries around the world during the 10-year period from 2010 to 2020. And it said that the most important determining factor of what it called Christian vitality, meaning the growth and not prosperity in the monetary sense, but healthiness, whatever, of Christianity through all of those countries, has been whether or not the government of the country gives official support to Christianity through their laws and policies. And you may be thinking, well, of course. I mean, if the government is supporting Christianity, then Christianity is going to do better. And if they're opposing Christianity, then Christianity is going to do worse. Wow. But wait, what this study claimed to show was the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. That in countries over that 10-year period where Christianity was getting some kind of official support from the government, Christianity actually tended to not flourish, whereas in the countries where Christianity was not supported by the government, Christianity did flourish. Mm-hmm. Now
that just shows it's human nature to not want to be told what to do.
Well, and there's some interesting responses to the study, but before we get all of that, Ben, what do you think when you heard it?
Yeah, it is definitely. I think you're right that when you just say the general conclusion that there's a connection between government support and the flourishing of Christianity, then yeah, it is kind of seems like a no-brainer. But it is counterintuitive when you read deeper into this that it's actually the opposite is true when there is less government support for Christianity. And actually, if you're a student of church history, that's not so surprising.
No, I know.
Because the church has always flourished under times of persecution. Look at the early church, during times of Roman persecution and Jewish persecution, the very first church that, we saw the Lord added to their number daily, those who were being saved. You look at Pentecost and thousands of people come to Christ. So under times of duress, that's the Christian message is one of hope. And so when there's a general undertone of hopelessness, then people are going to want to flock to what's going to give them that hope. And we as Christians believe we have the ultimate answer to that God has given us that through Christ Jesus. That's why it's called good news. And so when people are starving for good news, then that's when it's going to hit home the hardest. One other thing that was in this article that I found interesting, it singled out Hungary specifically. I don't know if that's where you were going as far as
it's one of the things that was mentioned, yeah.
But it is interesting. Well, this also says, it's also true the close alignment between Christianity and a given nation state can obscure the difference between the two. So to say that Hungary is officially Christian is to create a semantic space in which it's easy to mistakenly see being Christian and being a Hungarian at the same thing. You could say the same as Americans, Yeah. We hear this the rhetoric all the time that our nation was founded on Christian principles. We're a Christian nation. So a lot of times we conflate the two. To be American is to be Christian or vice versa. And that can be problematic at times. And this even points out, a lot of the Eastern Orthodox religion, it's become so intertwined that it's common to say Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or Serbian Orthodox, Romanian Orthodox. It's all tied to their particular nationality. So the point that it's making here is that that state support that binds Christianity, it also binds the religion's credibility to that state. So when leaders of that state have failures, then it's reflective on Christianity as a whole. And so that's something that we definitely don't want to be yoked to the world, so to speak. And
Jeanette Harrington says, good explanation, Ben. I agree, Jeanette. That was a great explanation. So thank you. And so I did find it interesting that it's one of these things where, in the rules, in the realm of logic, one of the things we like to say is correlation does not necessarily equal causation. All right. So there may be a connection in some way, shape, or form between, government endorsement or a reverse relationship between government endorsement or a religion of Christianity and Christianity's flourishing. But just because there's a connection between the two doesn't mean one is causing the other. One could be causing some third factor, which is now contributing to this over here. And so it doesn't necessarily mean there's a direct connection between the two. And like, for example, one of the proposals that this article raised is like, well, wait a minute, look at the list of countries where you're saying Christianity is growing, flourishing, things like that. Those are countries that are, they're fundamentally different than the Western nations where we're seeing it decline, because in those countries where it's growing, there's a mass evangelization effort going on in those countries, as opposed to the ones where you're seeing it declining. There's really not. It's kind of like you say, we think of Christianity, or people often say the U.S. is a Christian nation. We've talked about that before a long time ago. And so there's this mentality almost like, oh, we don't need to evangelize here. And so what's going to happen? You get lax and things start to lessen.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily the government's endorsement or lack of endorsement that's causing that, as much as the evangelization efforts may have caused some of the government endorsement, and then also are what's causing the growth. And and the reverse would be true for the other countries. So that's not necessarily a connection between them. Although I'll tell you, when I saw this, my first thought was related to some of what you said, but it brought me back to a quote by C.S. Lewis, because I love C.S. Lewis. Don't agree with him on everything, but I love C.S. Lewis. He's very eloquent, if nothing else. And his quote was this: God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. If you've got a country like a lot of the Western countries, like the United States, where, let's face it, by and large, people are living a more comfortable lifestyle than they are in some of these other countries where we're seeing Christianity grow. People, when you've got nothing else to lean on, you tend to be more willing to lean on God. And when you don't see that need, when you're comfortable, you feel like you're comfortable in what you've got, then you know what? You don't open the door for God as much.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of these countries where people are not as comfortable, that's where you see the gospel being received more, and you see people being more receptive to the gospel message. Because because their situation has stripped away anything else that they could try to rely upon in lieu of God. How often do we see, even in our capitalistic culture here, it's, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's, rely upon how much money you have in your savings account. We're always looking to these other material things for our security. Because we live in a, by and large, prosperous nation, we have these other things that can distract us from God. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that in that environment, you start to see Christianity on the decline by and large, whereas in these other countries, you see it on increase, and there's nothing to do with the government sponsorship.
It reminds me of a quote that I heard a while ago. I may have shared it on this program before, but it's a quote from a missionary in Africa who came over to the U.S. and was talking with a pastor. And he said, "Pastor, in America, you believe in God. In Africa, we depend on God."
Yeah.
And there is a difference between belief and faith and action. Belief or
just quote James while you're at it. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Faith without works is dead. Exactly. But yeah, so it's
And Jeanette says another good explanation, Ken. Thank you, Jeanette. His was better, but that's okay.
But they're both fine.
That's called humility. False humility, maybe, but no. On my part, not on yours. I just realized it sounded like I insulted Ben. I was trying to be self-deprecating, and I was him-deprecating.
I got it. It's all good. Yeah, it's like that correlation between I forget what it is, but it's prayer or what is it? Something about prayer is, or belief is praying for rain. Faith is carrying the umbrella. Basically, it's that expectation. I think by and large, of course, I don't want to generalize too much, but in, like you're saying, in a culture that is comfortable, a lot of times comfort breeds apathy. And so we see a lot of Christians who are maybe just nominal Christians, just Christians by name only. And only God is the judge of the heart. And so ultimately that will be revealed on Judgment Day. However, what we see in practice, the fruit that we're seeing is kind of pitiful fruit for some, because I think due in part to that comfortability and apathy.
Have you ever seen the movie Facing the Giants?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a story told in there about two farmers, both of which were praying for rain in the midst of a drought, but only one went out and prepared his fields. And that's the difference that you're talking about between belief and faith. And so, what are you doing? Preparing for rain. And that's kind of it's a line that's resonated with our family. I know my wife and I have used it an awful lot. It's not enough just to pray for the rain to come. What are you doing to prepare for it? Because when you prepare for it, that's showing you have the expectation that God can and will provide. So anyway, now that does not mean we're not going to go into certain preachers' theologies about I'm praying to have my bank account grow by $20,000 overnight, so I'm going to go out and buy a Maserati today.
Name it and claim it.
That is not what that means. But there is a matter of, the Bible says, God will provide your needs.
Yeah.
And do you act in such a way that you really believe that? Or do you rely on something else to provide for your needs?
Right. Not
your wants, not your, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice to have, I personally, I want a Black Magic Pocket Cinema 4K camera. Until the day comes that I can afford to buy one for myself, though I'm not going to say, God, please give me that Pocket Cinema 4K camera. And I'm just going to go I'm going to use a credit card right now to charge it. I can't afford it, but I'm going to charge it on a credit card right now because I'm naming and claiming that you're going to give me that money before the credit card bill comes due. No, that's not what the Bible teaches.
Yeah.
So
right.
Anyway. All right.
That's you shall not put the Lord your God to the test.
So want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
All right. Have we beaten that story to death?
I don't know about to death, but I think we've covered it.
We've covered it. All right, I've lost track. So this next story I had is me because I had them out of order, but you're supposed to introduce this one, right?
Okay, yep.
All right.
So this is an article, actually twofold. The first one was a op-ed from the CEO of the Washingtonian.
Wait a minute, that's not what I had next. Wait, am I completely out of order? Wait a minute. Change the byline.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're right, I'm wrong. I'm so out of order. Wow, okay, hold on. Wait. Boom, done. Go.
Cool. So the Washingtonian
in some
magazine,
way, he'll still be out of order.
There's only one
story after this, so I better not be.
So last Thursday, the Kathy Merrill, who's the CEO of the Washingtonian magazine, published an op-ed on last Thursday entitled, "As a CEO, I want my employees to understand the risks of not returning to work in the office." So the overall overtone of this op-ed was she was pointing out the risks of working from home and how that can correlate to a lack of job security. Saying that at one point, things that are kind of unmentioned as duties, but creating staff culture and celebrating each other's birthdays and talking with one another in person. It's a lot harder. She had mentioned it's a lot harder to offer feedback when someone is working from home, direct feedback or instant feedback. And so all of those things kind of amount to, she says, about I forget the exact percentage that she gave, but a good percentage of one of her employees, or just general employees, she's speaking generally, an employee's job description. Well, the Washingtonian staff, including a lot of whom work from home, either periodically or fully, and they saw this as a threat to their own job security. And so in response to what they thought was a tone-deaf article, they issued a strike. And so for a full day, the next day, they went completely silent. No new articles were posted on the Washingtonian's website. No new social media posts went out. Nothing. Complete radio silence for that entire day as a message to the CEO, who then she tried to run some damage control by saying to her staff that she was not going to be taking any of their benefits or anything like that, or their jobs were not at risk. But the message was still being sent out. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. What's your thoughts?
Wait, I forgot how to do this. Don't get that joke. Watch last week's show. No, I'm not going to go too lawyer on people here. I just you're right. The CEO then tried to do, I like the way you put it, damage control afterwards after everybody went on strike. And the funny thing is, hey, to their credit, they weren't unionized or anything, and the employees just got together and they did this on their own without having any kind of formal organizational structure in place to do that. And so that took. I guess that's to be applauded on their part. Now, I will say that. I don't agree with the employees on this one. And the first of all, look, there are certain businesses that have discovered through this pandemic that certain of their jobs probably can be done remotely. There was some Christian business recently. I don't remember if it was a publisher or what it was that had just bought a new headquarters and has now sold it because they realized that they don't need that much space and so their plan was a certain percentage of their workers were going to stay remotely, then they could afford to do that, and it worked well. I can't remember what the business was now. It's going to bug me.
Can't think off the top of my head.
Yeah, but so to some extent that has happened. The flip side of the coin is there are also professions and jobs where it just doesn't work. It's not as efficient to be working remotely. And what this CEO was saying in the op-ed was, look, if your boss gives you the opportunity or wants you to come back to work in person and you don't, you got to realize that there are potential consequences to that. And ultimately, that's what bosses are for. That's what managers are for. You can agree with them. You can disagree with them. We live in almost every state in this country is what's called an at-will employment state, which means unless you've got some kind of contract, you don't like your job, you can quit. You don't have to give 2 weeks notice. That's a misnomer. A lot of people think you don't have to. You can walk out the day if you want, as long as you don't have a contractual relationship otherwise. And like I said, I think at least 48 or 49 of the states are at-will employment states. So it's a lot. It's an overwhelming majority. But that's what the manager's job is to do. Their job is to try to figure out, okay, how to best make this company work. And if in their judgment, they think certain positions need to be there in person, and you don't agree with that, then your remedy is, okay, go find another job. That's what that job requires. You don't like that, that's fine. That's your prerogative, but go somewhere else. And it sounded like she was saying, even, look, you got to understand there's also practical realities to it. You want to make it hard to fire you, then an employer is going to have a lot harder time, and this is human nature, terminating someone who they have a relationship with as opposed to someone who's just an email address.
She had cited that, I think, in the article. She said the hardest employee to fire is one basically. Right. Yeah.
And so it's not, I didn't find anything she said in that article to be particularly controversial, to be honest with you. And it's not a matter of whether you think it's fair or not fair. Maybe you think it's unfair, and that's fine. That doesn't change the practical reality. And that's kind of what I took the article to mean. It's like, hey, look, whether you agree with the fact that employers do this, whether you disagree with the fact that employers do this is what employers do. Right. All right. And so you've got to understand that if you have the opportunity to come back and you want to keep that job, then you have an incentive to try to get, maybe we should put this back with that unemployment story.
I was
should have reordered this a little bit. And so now, I do agree, and I applaud the employees from the perspective of they had a point of view they wanted to have heard, and they organized and they got it heard. And you know me, big marketplace of ideas, I think that's great. I don't happen to agree with their perspective, but I applaud them for doing what they did to get their voices heard. Now, they're not unionized under contracts. One of the results could be, okay, you're all fired, but that would put the Washingtonian out of business, and so that's why they know they can get away with it. So I'm a little upset that the CEO kind of backtracked a little bit on it.
She wrote this.
I know that she had to.
She wrote an op-ed piece.
Right.
In the Washington Post is where she wrote.
Oh, in the Washington Post.
Right. I think that's what it was. Or was it Washington Post? Maybe it was Washingtonian. Was it in her own magazine or was it somewhere else? I think maybe this article was just written by the Washington Post that's reporting on it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, so she writes an op-ed piece.
No, it was the Washington Post.
Was it? Okay.
Yep.
Who cares? She wrote an op-ed, which is opinion.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So she's expressing her opinion about the results of the pandemic. Yes.
Yes.
Did she speak specifically about her employees?
Well, the original title of the op-ed piece was, "As a CEO, I want my employees to understand the risks of not returning to work in the office."
Yeah.
So I could say, even though it sounds like the article was written very generally, I could see how, based on that title, her employees may have thought it was a threat to them. I guess my point is, I don't like the word threat. It's an employment, it's a contractual relationship, And my point is, okay, but if she's the boss and she wants to say, look, if I ask you to come back, you got to come back or you don't have a job, you may not like her, but she has that right.
Right.
To say
Well, I
that,
mean, yeah. How many people were upset because they had to start working from home at the beginning of the pandemic and be stuck at home?
Yeah, there was a learning curve to that, and now I think people have
And
become
have,
accustomed to it. And
I mean, think about it. You want a paper copy of something. You're probably using your own printer, your own ink, your own, unless they supplied for everybody a computer and a printer to take home. They maybe have a work laptop, but that doesn't necessarily mean they had their own printing device at home. So, I mean, when we had to work from home, we were printing using our own paper and our own ink in a lot of cases. And I know that was a big deal for a lot of students at the very beginning, having the printing capabilities and having access to a computer. But suddenly, that cost has been outweighed with whatever convenience there is to, working in your pajama bottoms and, the lack of having to pay money for gas to commute, whatever it is. But everybody was upset when that first change happened. People just don't like change. And now they're being told to change again.
That may be a large part of what it comes down to. But I think I like what you said, Ken, about, it is every employer's prerogative to mandate, more or less, whether they want their employees in person or working remotely. And it may be a different story for each workplace.
Right, absolutely.
I think Google still is on, everybody's working from home, at least I think they said until summer 2021. So they're still all working from home. Or working remotely, but and certain jobs lend themselves to that. There's all you have to do is look at the slew of memes throughout the pandemic of, the memes like pilots working from home, and there's this guy with a little paper airplane doing this. Like there are some jobs you just can't do that. And so I think she had the right to do that. She had the right to post. And again, to your point, Mary Kay, it's an opinion piece. So, of course, she had the right to do that. But I do sympathize a little with the employees who saw that. I don't know if there's a different word other than threat, but they saw that targeting them because she wrote it in the first person.
Yeah, that headline really does. It did make it seem like it was targeting them specifically. I agree.
So I can see their point.
I wonder if she chose that headline. I mean, you said, because that's one of the other reason why I was wondering if she wrote it in the Washingtonian or if it was put for some other publication, because if she put it in another publication, she may not have had.
Quite often, the editor of the publication actually comes up with the headline.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's possible. We don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying.
Right.
Because if the tone of the art, I don't know did you read the original article?
Just the quotes that were here.
Because I'm just wondering if the tone of the article was just in general what she as from the CEO perspective is seeing with some of the difficulties with having your entire workforce at home, and was speaking to that and never really said anything threatening inside the article. Do you know what I'm saying? Whatever, because the word risk is sort of threatening. I mean, let's put it, because that's the one word out of the entire title that sort of makes it sound a little.
Is there another word? I mean, there are risks. I mean, that's kind of I guess I get back to. Well,
you could have, there are other ways of phrasing it. You could have said CEO wants her employees to know the benefits of coming back to work.
That's exactly how she put it. So in, even though the headline said.
But if the headline says the opposite,
and
that's the first thing people are going to see.
According to this excerpt, she says, although there might be some pains and anxiety going back into the office, the biggest benefit for coworkers may be simple job security. So she put it in the
she
positive.
phrased it that way in the article itself.
And then also talking about, my intent was to write about how worried I and other CEOs are about preserving the cultures that we built up in our offices. So talking about those non-defined job duties that are part of just the general office culture.
Yeah. And I do think that, the pandemic has given employers an opportunity, even from a good business perspective, to take a look at their workforce and see if there are certain, roles that can be done through teleworking, because that can actually save the employer money, maybe a good business move. But again, ultimately, that decision is up to the managerial staff of any corporation, and the employees. You do have an option if an employer tells you, "I want you back to work." If you don't want to be, well, then yeah, you go. I mean, like you said, there are other employers that are allowing people to work telework, so maybe that's what you go look for. But I can see there's also I can see your point that even if everything I'm saying is legally, technically, even morally true. There's also a way to go about doing it, and if she came across attacking in the way she did it, then that also was not a good move on her part. I can see that. I can get that.
What I worry. What if it wasn't her fault? What if I'm right and it was the editor who?
Yeah.
Well, then that's
because if you have that kind of title, you would expect that the tone of the article would be in line with it.
Yeah.
And if they weren't in line tone wise, the title versus the sort of generalness of the article, then there's probably a good chance somebody else wrote the title.
Well, but then her response to it, when all this hubbub happened, she says things like, "I have assured our team that there will be no changes to benefits or employee status. I am sorry if the op-ed made it appear like anything else." And to me, that kind of rang hollow, because I was like, well, why wouldn't there be? I mean, doesn't that kind of undermine your entire op-ed then? I mean, if you're saying that, hey, it's really hard, we need people to come back to work, otherwise there could be changes in employee status. Oh, but you don't need to come back to work and there's not going to be any change in your employee status.
True.
It's like you're not practicing what you preach. And so, I mean, I don't know. I almost think that the response should have been, "Hey, I didn't mean to be attacking anybody. I was actually just trying to be helpful and give you all some helpful advice so you know what's going on, both you and everybody out there, not just my employees." That I could have seen as the proper response, other than to say, "Hey, everything I said in that article doesn't apply to you guys, though.
Yeah,
it applies to every other employer, but not here at the Washingtonian." That seems kind of wrong.
Yeah, and then the backpedaling, you're right. I think the backpedaling kind of undermines what the original intent.
So just out of curiosity, let me throw a conversation starter out there for the two of you. Over the course of the past year or so, we were working from home, and then we were sort of partially working from home and partially working from here, and now we're pretty much back to being here working at the church.
I'm assuming by you all, you mean the staff here at Trinity in general.
Yeah.
You and I were working at home for maybe a couple of weeks initially.
Yeah.
We've been here pretty much ever since.
Right.
Okay, I never stopped coming in because the food closet never stopped being open. Well, I mean,
But by and large, yes, that's the model
by and
that the staff here at Trinity followed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, I think, over the course of the year, seen all the different, we've seen the all at home, practically all at work, and we've seen a sort of in-between hybrid. What do you see as being the benefits? And do you think that some of the opinions you saw expressed in this article about the article, have merit? What do you think? Go.
I definitely see some of the merits of the article. I think what she talks about with the general office culture. There's a certain culture of and working in ministry, you're working with people, so it's. Yes, you can do that. And when we had to, that was great. It was a great benefit, when we had to work from home, in my case, you can do website stuff from anywhere with internet access, but also visitations when hospitals and nursing homes are shut down, a lot of the visitations just switch to phone visitation anyway, just calling people. So there's that personal connection that doesn't necessarily need to be done in the office. But when things are opened up, and especially a church is reopened for people to come in, then you need to have people in there who are able to minister to people as they're coming in and being, ministered to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I don't know if I'm, and I guess it gets back to conceding
Okay, but
here.
she was talking about office culture, so it was more of a relationship between coworkers kind of thing than necessarily staff client,
True.
wasn't it? I
Potentially,
mean, that's
yeah. I mean, I don't know how broadly she was intending it to be, but I come at it from keep in mind, I come up from the perspective of, and I will admit my faults. I'm a guy that was here. I mean, with the exception of the first, what was it, 2 weeks or so? I guess we were under where originally when the governor announced the shutdown, we were under the impression, and everybody was under the impression that everything had to shut down. Then I think it was about 2 weeks later, he came out and said, "Oh no, I didn't mean literally. Here, you're still allowed to do these limited things." All right. And so for like that first 2 weeks, we had all of the video equipment and everything set up in my office at home, and we were doing, Zoom, like services through Zoom and Google Meet and all that. And the funny thing was, I was scheduled to preach, and so one of the first weeks from home, while I'm also trying to manage this, whole, I don't know, NORAD station.
Yeah.
I'm
okay. You make it sound like you were doing it by
no,
yourself.
you were there with me. You were there with me.
And it's our office, not yours.
So it was, so there was that. But then after that, once the governor kind of clarified things, yeah, by and large, Mary Kay and we've been here, and we were here for, there were lots of times that we were here, and very few other people were, and it made me appreciate that there is a certain workability that you're never going to duplicate through Zoom. You're never going to duplicate through Google Meet or anything, or telephone calls or anything like that. There's something about, I need Ben. Let me go down the hall to his office and ask him something, and, just like, spur of the moment. Hey, I was meeting with Pastor Jay today and realized, oh, well, we're talking about, we need Ryan. Let's get Ryan in here, know? And so there certainly is a benefit that can't be duplicated. But again, we're talking about working in ministry where a lot of what we do overlaps, coordinates, this branch needs to coordinate with that branch and all that, which is not necessarily going to be the case for every profession. So I agree there are lines of work where, teleworking could work out fine. But I certainly see the flip side of the coin is where there are things that just won't, and that you need to be there for, and you're never gonna duplicate them. So,
yeah. Case in point, pre-pandemic, Katie used to work in medical billing, so as long as you get a stack of invoices that you got to file throughout the day, and you can do that remotely.
Well, all I did around here was video editing. I got news for you. Even with all the time I'm here, I'm doing video editing at home. I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to do some video editing. Doesn't matter where I am. I got a laptop. I got the footage. I can edit it.
Yeah.
But you want me to film something, so I have some footage to edit. Now we're talking something different, you know. And so but there are certain aspects that certainly that could work out for. So,
well, for me, it's funny because I'll say sometimes because if Lori is here, then we're in the office together. We share an office. Sometimes I'll say, not that she ever bothers me, because usually we work very well together, side by side. We're not always necessarily working together on the same thing. But there are some times when we'll both say, I need to go home because people keep interrupting me and I need to concentrate on this. Or we'll shut the door and not that you guys don't have the key to the office anyway, but
generally office etiquette is at the door closed.
I know. But just because we need to concentrate on whatever we're doing. But then there was a lot of times when we were here and it was just Ken and I here, and I was in the office trying to get things done. And, I was just like, it's lonely. I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, imagine, how it is when we're leaving here after one of these shows. Okay. 'Cause we're the last ones here. But it was like that all the time.
You know, I find it funny, Ben, that you say that generally the office etiquette is the doors closed, you don't knock. I think it was about a couple months ago, wasn't it? While we were live on the air, and I won't say who it was, a certain head of school, was knocking on the door while we're on the air of the show. So,
funny.
yeah, you never know.
Well,
So-
speaking of just the show in general and how it was and the workability of it, I think we saw the difference between, because there were episodes when we were doing it through a Zoom. And we saw the challenges with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are certain things you can't exactly replicate.
You can't. Hey,
And then the 16 Chihuahuas apart.
Yeah, exactly.
we have definitely beaten this story to death, so we're going to move on to the next one. All right. And I've lost her. Am I introducing this one? This is the last one, right? I'm supposed to introduce this one, okay? Yeah. All right. So this is the one, like a long time ago when I said our next story was going to dive back into controversial topics. This is the one I thought it was going to be, even though that was like 2 stories ago, okay? So I best we saved it for last. So this concerns a chaplain with the Church of England by the name of Dr. Bernard Randall in the UK. He was employed as the chaplain at Trent College in Derbyshire. Now, Trent College is a Protestant and an evangelical Church of England school near Nottingham. And he was hired as the church chaplain. And his, somewhere on here, one of these stories I know I saw what his official job description was. But it was, here it is. His job description declared his role to be the particular voice and embodiment of Christian values, which are at the heart of Trent's ethos. So that was what his job description was as the school's chaplain. Well, in 2019, the school adopted what they called an LGBT plus inclusive curriculum, and they had some training of the staff that went along with that. And as part of that training, let's see, I'm trying to find the exact quote. Following the training, the staff members in that training session were instructed to chant, quote, "smash heteronormativity." As this is what they were basically asked to repeat. So he actually gave a talk, and, you know, so as not to be, I want to try to get away from, you know, we always talk about misleading headlines and everything like that. I don't want there to be any chance of that. So I'm going to read, because I found an article that actually quoted what he said.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm actually going to read what he said in this talk, and then we'll talk about what happened as a result of this. Here's what he said. He said, there are, and this is speaking of what the topic where he says, look, the LGBT plus curriculum of the teaching has some areas where it overlaps with Christian values. That's kind of where he was starting with. And then he went on from there to say this. There are areas where the two sets of ideas are in conflict. And in these areas, you do not have to accept the ideas and ideologies of LGBT activists. I'm sorry, I should back up and say when he's talking about there are certain areas they have in common, such as being against discrimination and things like that. So there are certain things we hold in common, but then he goes to say there are other areas where they're not in common and they do have a conflict. And in these areas, you do not have to accept the ideas and ideologies of LGBT activists. So it is perfectly legitimate to think that marriage should only properly be understood as being a lifelong exclusive union of a man and a woman. Indeed, that definition is written into English law. You may perfectly properly believe that, as an ideal, sexual activity belongs only within such marriage, and that therefore any other kind is morally problematic. That is the position of all the major faith groups, though note that it doesn't only apply to same-sex couples, as it is a belief based not only on Scripture, but on a highly positive view of marriage as the building block of a society where people of all kinds flourish, and on recognizing that there are many positive things in life more important than sex, if only we let them be. This viewpoint is recognized by many people as extremely liberating, and it's an ethical position which could also be arrived at independently of any religious text, I think. That's the quote of what he said, okay? So if I were to sum it up, I'd say, look, what he was saying is you are free to believe that in traditional marriage is essentially what the LGBT curriculum and everything that's being advanced here at the school says one thing. You are free to agree with that. You're free to disagree with that. You don't have to agree with that, is what he was basically saying. And then he went on to argue that this is what every major faith group believes. I think you can even arrive at this without resorting to religious text and come to the same conclusion, is what he was arguing. He was initially then called in for a disciplinary hearing. And After his disciplinary hearing, he received a letter from the school headmaster in August of 2019 that concluded his actions had amounted to gross misconduct and that he would be dismissed. More than that, he was referred to, let's see, what's it called? It's called Prevent, or the Prevent program in the UK, which is basically a program that handles alerts for people that are being radicalized into potential terrorism.
It's called anti-terrorism.
It's an anti-terrorism group. And so the idea is like, oh, if you see somebody you think might be on the path towards being radicalized into terrorism, then you report them to this Prevent program. He got, for these comments that I just read to you, he was reported to the Prevent program. Now, what happened as a result of that is, first of all, the complaint against him that was lodged with the Prevent program was eventually dismissed. And the board of the school did eventually reverse his dismissal. However, it was not just a blanket reversal. It was he was still given an official reprimand. They called it his first warning. And they said getting his job back was with the following condition. He was banned from discussing any, and this is now a quote, any topic or express any opinion in chapel or more generally around school that is likely to cause offense or distress to members of the school body. So he was not allowed to say anything that could have caused anybody any potential offense or distress at all. That's not limiting at all. Then, as a result, then the COVID pandemic hits, and he was put on furlough. And this is a little confusing. Both articles I found said, and then he was made redundant. I don't know what exactly that means, but it sounds like he was essentially laid off. Yeah. Once the COVID pandemic hit, they said, "Oh, we got to put people on furlough," and well, now there's not a job back for you.
Non-essential, I guess, is the redundant.
It's what it sounds like, yeah. And so he's now out of a job. He has filed legal action against the school, saying this is all stemming back to that original incident that you've let me go unjustly. So, what do you think? I know what you think already. I could say your part for you, but I will give you the chance to do it. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, it's no one. I'm glad to hear at least that the report to Prevent, the anti-terrorism program, was removed, because that had no legs whatsoever to stand on. However, in this culture, you never know anymore. First of all, in reading his actual statement, nothing that he said actively himself was necessarily going against the curriculum. He was just encouraging. He was saying that students are allowed to question it. He's saying they're allowed to question it.
That's why I wanted to read his exact words, because I want to avoid the accusation that, oh, well, maybe he said something a little more inflammatory than this article is making it seem. That's what he said.
Wow. Yeah, it's baffling, but sadly not entirely surprising, because it's not the first time we've heard of something like this. First of all, it's laughable too. We actually chuckled in here when you read the part about not to say anything that could be deemed offensive to any student. Like, that's so wide, so broad, so vague. And are they holding themselves to that same standard?
I'm offended by their statement.
Exactly. So how do you even enforce that? That's just asking for a second infringement, and
I think that's exactly it. You're hitting the nail on the head. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. And so clearly, to me, seems targeted for sure. And what's more worrying is that he wasn't even he was just expressing freedom of speech, essentially. Right. It's an attack on free speech.
Not even freedom of speech. He was just advocating freedom of
ideas.
Yeah, of ideas, of holding to an idea.
Okay, so this was the UK, right?
Yes.
All right, where do they differ on those things? Because you're
on freedom of speech, I'm not sure. I don't think they have it like constitutionally ingrained like we do here in the U.S., but I could stand to be corrected. But theoretically, they have it, but I don't think it's as protected as it is theoretically here in the U.S. We're seeing some ways around that, I think, in the U.S. now too. But
they do, in theory, have some kind.
They have some kind of freedom of speech. Yeah. Yes, I'm not sure exactly how high up their constitutional ladder.
Freedom of religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because don't they have...
Well, they have the Church of... He's a pastor for the Church of England. Yeah. I mean,
Which
Church of England.
I know. Is that still their
It's
I
still
mean,
the official state
religion.
religion,
Yeah.
theoretically.
Theoretically.
Although,
Okay, I'm
yeah,
just-
Prince Charles said this was years ago now. He said that when he took the throne, he wanted his title to become Defender of the Faith to be changed to Defender of the Faiths, plural. So, but that's a whole other sidetrack. We're not going to go down. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So
The rate he's going, he may not take the throne. Mom's hanging on there.
Right. Yeah. Definitely seems intentional on the school's part, and also just forcing people to say, that's the other scary part, is they were forced in this sensitivity training to chant, what is it, smash heteronormativity. Just replace the mantra and you've got, 1984.
yeah, this is what scares me, all right, about this situation. First of all, if you don't believe there's such a thing as cancel culture, Exhibit A.
Yeah.
Not just here in the U.S., obviously, this is in the UK. And I've had people tell me that, so we don't believe in cancel culture. And I do believe, historically, we could look at there have been incidents the other way around where the right has been, what we call the right here in the U.S., has tried to cancel the opinions on the left. It has happened. I think that's almost a false equivalency in modern days. I do think it's going the other way around more often, but it's not. I don't want to say it's universal. But here's a prime example, and this is what's scary about this. Again, look at what he was advocating. First of all, he was just saying, look, you're talking freedom of belief. You have not even saying, hey, go out. He didn't say, go out and protest this thing. He didn't do any of that. There was no call to action. There was just, you are free to believe as you want to believe.
Yeah.
All right. This is what I believe. Here's why I believe it. That's all he was saying. All right. The flip side is the school, like you were saying, was actually telling its staff to vocalize support for a certain position.
Right.
Does nobody see a problem with that?
Right.
I mean, it's like, no, this is forced belief. I don't care. Substitute any belief you want for these particular things. All right. If you don't see it, just flip flop the positions and see if you'd be comfortable with that. Would you believe with if the school were to require or encourage, strongly encourage its employees to start chanting heteronormativity rules, and then when someone tried to just tell people, hey, if you don't agree with that, you're entitled to have a belief that disagrees with that. And then that person was then reported to an anti-terrorism group and fired their job. Would you think that's fair?
No.
I mean, and that's what's scary about it, is that this is, it's not, we're long past the point of, you're free to believe what you want to believe. It used to be, you just keep your beliefs to yourself.
Right.
And that was bad enough. But now we've gotten to the point, it's like, no, we are requiring you to outwardly express, whether they were literally requiring or just, in part of the training. This is part of the training that, by the way, you're required to go to the training.
Right.
We're not saying you're required to chant this, but you're required to go to the training, and part of the training is you chanting this. You express adoption of this particular belief system. And then if you even suggest people have the right to internally inside their head think something different, now we're going to call you a terrorist and we're going to fire you and cost you your job. That's terrifying to me.
Well, and the other thing I think that may go unnoticed by some is, in his statement, he wasn't even singling out Christianity as the Christian belief. He said, we hold a high view of marriage, and this is the view of most major religions,
right?
Christianity, Judaism, Islam. And so there's the majority, at least to my understanding, majority of the world's population still holds to one of those three major religions, even though they've diminished.
Although let's be honest, within those, and this is where I thought that maybe he was a little misleading in that. I mean, he's right, and yet there are certainly more liberal branches.
Sure.
I mean, of definitely of Christianity and Judaism that you could point to,
sure,
that would not agree with that statement. They would say, no, we think of ourselves as Christian, but we do not agree that it has to, that heteronormativity, as he puts it, has to be the predominant belief system.
Right.
So.
Well, that's a fair point, and definitely that's a fair point. I concede that. However, still, I think there's a large enough percentage of the population that this isn't a small number of people that we're talking about that hold to the high view of marriage. And so for that large number of population to be forced to bow to this oppression. It's oppressive, and that's truly baffling.
And that's what come full circle to something we were talking about earlier. I think we as a worldwide society should be able to take a look at a story like this, remove the specific belief content that's involved for a moment, and just look at what happened. All right. And should be able to be unified. Why can't we be unified around that to say, no, it is wrong for anybody, especially a government, or not even government, it's a Church of England school, to say, tell its employees in one breath, you have to vocally say you agree with position X. And if you don't agree, or you tell anybody that they're allowed to have a difference of opinion, then you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
I mean, or even if you ignore the terrorism thing, or you're fired. I mean, forget the content of the particular beliefs. We should be able to unify. We should be able to defend each other's moral right to have an opinion, and we don't further ourselves as a society by trying to suppress opinions. We further ourselves as a society by letting them come out into the open. I'd rather, if you have an opinion that's different than mine, I will defend your right to express it. I want you to express it, because you know what? The way we get rid of bad ideas is by bringing them out into the open so that we can talk about them and point out why they're bad ideas, as opposed to when you don't allow them out into the open, then they just stew in this little corner of people who are like-minded. And so it just grows and grows and grows and grows over here without ever getting exposed to criticism. And then before you know it, it's the Baptist Church folks that Westboro Baptist Church, and then you got a Westboro Baptist Church on your hands. So no, bad ideas or differences of opinions need to be brought out in the open so we can discuss them, so that good ideas can be shown to be good ideas, bad ideas can be shown to be bad ideas.
Yeah, agreed.
So, all right, soapbox down.
Mary Kay looked like she was going to say something. Oh, okay.
No, she's done. My soapbox was so powerful, we're just like, peace out, mic drop. So, all right, that's all we got. So, hey, those are our 5 stories for tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. That was stimulating conversations here this evening. And just by way of reminder, we are here every Wednesday, just about at 5:30 p.m. You can watch us live. If you can't join us live, join us after the fact. Put your comments in the comment section. Which, by the way, I did not. I was not true to my word. Shoot, I said that if someone puts a comment, and for the most part, if you put a comment in the comment section for a video after the fact that you're not able to watch us live, that we can bring it up at the top of the next show. And I did not do that. There was a comment to last week's show that I did not bring up, and I'm going to pull it up right now. You probably already know. I don't know if you saw it or not. Do you know what the comment was?
I'm not sure that I did.
All right, hold on. So here is the comment from last week's show. It's from Allison Mayer. And this gets back to the joke I did earlier tonight. That's why you probably didn't even know what I was doing. Well, you did, because we still talked about it on the show. She said, my father, referring to this. Oh. My father has the same mannerism before he says something profound. Large sigh, sits back, crosses arms, must be a characteristic of logical thinkers. To which I responded, I don't know if I ever actually say anything profound, as much as I just think I'm about to say something profound. I think it, but I don't necessarily do it. So anyway, there you go. But seriously, folks, if you're watching us after the fact, we still invite you to be part of the program. And the way you can do that is on the YouTube channel now, mind you. Go to the YouTube channel, find the video of what you're watching on there, and post a comment on YouTube, and we'd be happy to bring it up and address it at the top of the next show, or the end of the next show, as this week's case may be. So, all right, that's all we got. You got anything else?
I think we're good.
All right. Thank you to everybody who participated in the National Day of Prayer last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you, Mary Kay, for your lovely producing and contributions here today. Thank you, Ben, very much. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you join us again next week. See you then.
Thank you, Ken, for your arm crossing and profundity.
Profundity. Big word. And God bless.